How many of you have watched the news recently? And I'm speaking just in the last 2 weeks. Quite a few of us, okay. Did you know that in the last 2 weeks, from July 26th to August 11th, there were 10 mass shootings in this country? 10. In the state of Florida, in the year 2026, they have recorded 15 mass shootings, gun violence. That doubles what it was in 2025 for the same period of time. Now, I don't want to disparage this, but to understand what I'm talking about here, mass shootings are defined as a time when someone uses a gun and injures or kills 4 or more people. I was expecting a lot more of those. That's a lot of people injured by gun violence. And I don't want to discount what many have said are the contributing factors to this much violence in the world, because honestly, the most common explanations for the root causes of mass shootings are mental health crisis or crises and overly lax gun laws. Both of those have merit. Okay? I'm not arguing those points with you this morning. They have merit. However, I have another theory, and I believe with my very existence down to my soul that there is another factor for this extensive violence, and it is the fading of forgiveness in our society. How often do you hear people threatening physical violence before having a conversation? I see some heads doing this. That means you all know what I'm talking about. How many of you drive on the streets of the local communities? I'll escape. If you got here this morning by car, I'm guessing you drove on the local streets of the community, right? Now, I am guilty of this as much as the next person. I get impatient sitting at a light, and when somebody doesn't go within the first 30 seconds after the light turns green, I might toot my horn, right? I'm seeing a lot of finger pointing going on right now, too. I'm not pointing anybody out. I am guilty of this. I get impatient at times, but that's a symptom of this, right? Could be a contributing factor to the way that we work in this world. To me, it is overly clear that forgiveness and conversation about being wronged have lost their place in our society. We've lost the ability to extend and to receive grace. And this risks crushing our very experience in this world. We are more apt to settle a score than we are to have a conversation, aren't we? I see a few heads saying yes. Okay, I'm glad you guys agree with me on this. We are going to get to the conversation part of this morning. Don't get me wrong, I think there are many people in this world committed to justice and value forgiveness, but I also think there's less and less people who value those things in our society and put value on those things. Technology is one of our greatest tools, right? Supposedly. Good answer, Tom. Technology is also one of the biggest contributors to this. How many of us have children or grandchildren under the age of 16? Yeah. How many of our grandchildren or children under the age of 16 are on social media almost every day? How many of us are on social media every day? Stephanie and I were just having a conversation about this, the contributions that social media has made to the ability or inability of our society to communicate. Have any of you been through a drive-through line recently, fast food or otherwise? Yeah. The next time you go through the line, pay attention to whether the person in the window actually looks at you or not. Chick-fil-A they do? Okay. Wendy's? All right. There's a few around town. I don't actually go to those stores because of some of my health conditions, but the ones that I go to, very few people look at you when you get up to the window and even less and less people have a conversation looking at you. He did this morning? Okay.
And he had a conversation.
And he did have a you are absolutely 100% correct. That is my wife. That is that voice that you often hear responding to me because she's used to this. Right? But our society has lost the ability to look at another person in the eyes and have a conversation with them. These are all contributing factors to, I think, to the ways that we handle things in this world. But what's the alternative to forgiveness? Is there an alternative to forgiveness? In the 1970s, there was a pastor in a small town that had not a single professional therapist or social worker in his community. Now, this particular pastor has written several articles, and in one that I read, he ended up counseling dozens of couples with troubled marriages in his lifetime as a pastor. And along the way, he discovered that those who learned and embraced forgiveness usually survived. Let me state that another way. The couples that he counseled, the ones that he counseled, those who embraced forgiveness and were able to work through their differences survived. Those who were not able to do that did not. Kind of makes sense, right? Makes a lot of sense if you think about what a relationship is. It's based on forgiveness and trust. Right? If you don't have trust, you can't have a relationship. His conclusions are that without forgiveness, no human relationship or communities can be sustained. Without forgiveness, centuries-long cycles of retaliation, violence, and genocide repeat themselves. Without forgiveness, now these are his words, okay? Without forgiveness, we are more subject to heart disease and heart attacks, strokes, and depression. He also concluded that we should forgive because it is profoundly practical. Now that I wholeheartedly agree with. To fail to forgive is to undermine the health and coherence of one's body, one's relationships, and the entire human condition. Kind of makes sense, right? Again, it's practical. That leads me to one of the most profound stories we have in our Bibles. The story of Joseph and his brothers. Aside from Jesus, he teaches us the most about forgiveness. Yes or no? Yes. Okay, good. Whew. It's going to make this a little bit easier. So let me get us to where we are in Joseph's story, because we have skipped over a whole lot of his story from last week to this week. At this point in his story, the favored son of Jacob, Joseph, has received special treatment leading to the envy of his brothers. Yes, we went over that last week. Okay, all right. Now, how many brothers does he have? 11 brothers. How many are older? 10. He has one younger brother, Benjamin. So he has 10 older brothers, and at least we think he has an older sister. One older sister. I feel bad for Dinah. She has 12 brothers, and only 2 of them are younger. I really feel bad for her. Now, also throughout this part of his story, he has been sold into slavery by those 10 brothers. Yes? You guys remember that? Okay. Do you guys remember what happened in Egypt while he was there? He had a dream. Was it his dream or was it somebody else's dream? There was a dream somewhere, right? There was a dream somewhere. I heard something. It was a baker that had a dream, but it was also Potiphar, the Pharaoh, who had a dream, right? Actually, Potiphar had 2 dreams. So, while he's in Egypt, he's living in Potiphar's house, and Potiphar's wife comes on to him, accuses him of misconduct, right? Anybody familiar with that story? Okay. So, what happens as a result of this misconduct that he's accused of? He goes to prison, correct. He's in prison, and while he's in prison, he meets the baker who has a dream. and Joseph interprets the baker's dream, which helps him to gain favor with Potiphar once again, because Potiphar now has two dreams that he interprets. One dream talks about 7 years of like vast harvest and wealth, and then 7 years of famine. All right? Now, I give you those details because it's important to understand that we are currently 2 years in that second set of 7 years. The story that we heard this morning happens 2 years into the 7 years of famine. All right, so we're 9 years after he initially interprets those dreams, at least 9 years. All right, so Joseph's probably in his 40s. We believe that he's somewhere in his 40s at this point. Now, the famine brought Joseph's brothers to Egypt. Why? For food, right? They were looking for sustenance. And they had heard that someone in Egypt had amassed all these great stores of grain. And so they come to Egypt to buy grain to keep their families alive. And as a result, Joseph does a couple of things to them, doesn't he? He retaliates, so to speak. You guys familiar with those stories? Yes, no, maybe so, maybe a little bit. So Joseph actually sends them home and says, "Bring back your brother Benjamin." And they're like, "Why? You don't know who we are." But Joseph convinces them to go home and bring Benjamin back. In the process, he hides some valuables in Benjamin's sacks, sends them back home. The brothers get arrested, and now they're before Joseph as the Lord of Egypt. All right? It kind of gets us to just about where we are this morning. I know this is a long way to get there, but there's a lot of story that we skipped over. And so now Joseph is standing before his brothers. He recognizes them, doesn't he? He knows who they are. What kinds of things do you think he could have done to his brothers if he really wanted to? He could have definitely made life miserable for them. Scott? He could have enslaved them. He could have put them in jail. Right? They harmed him deeply. What kinds of ways would you have gotten back at your siblings if they had done something to you? What was that? No, now you got to repeat it because somebody reacted. Thrown them in the pit, okay? Right? That's our natural reaction, right? We want to get even. We want to even the score. We don't want anybody to have anything over us. Is this what Joseph does? No. I want to have a little conversation this morning because this gets to the heart of this story. When have you ever been forgiven of something big? And it's based on your definition of big. All right, you guys have been really good so far this morning.
Good Lord, this is a lie. Excuse me. I can never get mad at God and Jesus
Okay.
because they have given me chance over chance over chance of everything I did.
All right, so God forgives us of everything, right? There's a good example of something big.
I'm going to go on the past, but finally, I opened my eyes.
You got to see it.
Like,
You felt that forgiveness for yourself, Mike. There's something big. Anybody else? Oh, come on. We've all been forgiven of big things in our lives, haven't we? It is a little hard, isn't it?
On the TV.
All right, well, so then how about I share? I'll start us off.
I've been forgiven for, I'd rather. Yes.
Okay. Do we all recognize that we've been forgiven of a lot of big things in our lives? If it wasn't for a very special someone in my life, I wouldn't have forgiven someone who ended up dying in my arms. Some of you know the story of the things that I've been through with my father. I was able to give him something he was unable to give to other people. While this is not a story of forgiveness of something big for me, this is a story of forgiveness that I forgave something big in my life. His 75th birthday would have been this past Thursday. And I couldn't help but think about him this week, given this story. It's funny that I've chosen this path for this summer, because it was nearly 60 years ago that he died in my arms. But it was because I was able to move beyond the pain and the hurt that he was able to take his last breath, literally in my arms. I don't tell you that story for sadness, or I'm still grieving to a certain extent, because I lost an opportunity over 3 years to reconcile with him in different ways. As much as his death was a blessing for him, it brought a lot of grief back into my heart. But this is a story that teaches us about how to be able to do those things. I mean, here's a man who had lived 17 years as a favored son, had received nothing but envy from his brothers because of what he was given over and above what they received. He was thrown into a pit and practically left for dead, sold into slavery, had to earn his way from being the lowest within a household, becoming favored within that household, and he did so. And when his brothers appeared before him, he could have easily sent them away and said, "No, I am your brother Joseph, and I have been hurt deeply by you." But instead, he takes them in his arms and he weeps openly on their shoulders after he reveals himself to them. So I ask you again, what does Joseph teach us? Forgiveness. Love one another, forgive each other. How about the very simple thing of, instead of getting angry and immediately thinking of violence, it's okay to get angry, gang. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to be a human being. But when we do those things, let's step into forgiveness rather than to violence. We need to be the example for this world. We need to start being who we say we are, able to forgive, able to have conversations, able to look at one another in the eyes and know that we trust one another enough to say, "Hey, look, you're doing something wrong. I still love you." And no matter how much we've been hurt, to be able to say, "I still love you." It's not the easy path. It's not the path of least resistance. And it's hard. It's the hardest thing I ever did in my life. But I am grateful for the opportunity that I had, because I was able to give him what he couldn't give to others. I've said it before, hurt people hurt people. And he was a hurt person. But if we continue that cycle of hurt, what are we teaching society? What are we teaching our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and the generations that follow? Fair question? Yeah.
How do you know if God forgives you?
That's a really tough question to give an easy answer to, Helen. But it is faith. It's trust and believing that because of Jesus Christ, we are already forgiven. We don't ever have to question it. It is our faith that gives us that. It is our trust in God's love for us, no matter what happens. Even when we don't feel like we deserve it, we have already received it.
The harder part is forgiving yourself.
Absolutely it is. That is the hardest part, Gail. Great point. Gail said the harder part is forgiving yourself. That is the toughest part about all this. And understanding and knowing that God has already forgiven us, so we don't need to hold on to it for ourselves. I had this cartoon given to me one time very early on in my ministry, and I love this cartoon. It was a picture of a pond, and it reminded me of the pond that I grew up near, where I used to go fishing all the time. And outside the pond was this little sign that said, "No fishing allowed." The caption underneath said, when you give God your confession, God takes that, throws it in the pond, and puts up the sign, "No fishing allowed." So when you've asked God for forgiveness through confession, let go of it. In other words, you've thrown it into the pond, and God has said, you don't need to fish it out. I've already taken it onto myself. That was my favorite cartoon. Friends, Joseph teaches us about what it means to truly forgive from the bottom of our hearts. He teaches us how to take and to learn from our experiences to better ourselves and not laud it over others. He teaches us about humility. He teaches us about forgiveness. But most importantly, he teaches us about how to be in relationship with others. So take what he teaches us through this story. Use it in your everyday life. It is the only way that the rest of the world is going to be able to see what it means to be forgiven and to truly forgive. Amen.